Very good. Well, just to start off, good afternoon, students, professors, guests, and our featured lecturer, Annie Chu. I'm Alexis Navarro, Chair of the Department of Architecture at East Elac College. We welcome you and are pleased to have you join us for the Architecture Lecture Series, organized by Professor Ajuje with assistance from NOMA student leaders. The Department of Architecture at Elac was established over 75 years ago, and we're recognized as one of the most successful college architecture programs in California, with a long tradition of success in transfers and professional development, with a wide range of courses taught by experienced architects and practitioners. This lecture series, now in its 11th year, is sponsored by the Elac Architecture Alumni Group, which also provides scholarships and mentorships. On behalf of the Department of Architecture, thank you, Annie, once again for joining us. I will now turn it over to Professor Ingelel, who will introduce our featured lecturer. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis.
Sure.
And thank you, Orhan, for organizing this amazing lecture series. So I have the very great honor of introducing today's lecturer, architect Annie Chu. And I've been lucky enough to have her as a colleague at Woodbury, where we taught together for many years. We also spent the entire pandemic together. Every week we would get together, have a group of us, and have happy hours. So I can say with very great conviction that she is as generous and kind as she's talented and influential. So what inspires me most about Annie is that she understands architecture as service to the next generation, to the community as a whole, and as a powerful force for civic good. Let me tell you a little bit about her background. She relocated to the United States from Hong Kong at the age of 16. After earning her Bachelor of Architecture degree at SciArc and her Master's of Science in Advanced Building Design from Columbia University, she conducted research, and I've heard her talk about it, it's really incredible, focused on Mayan and Incan architecture in Central and South America as recipient of the SOM Foundation Travel Fellowship. So Annie is a fierce champion of interior architecture as a distinct and emerging discipline. She likes to point out that we spend 90% of our time indoors, and so it makes sense to focus on this most human-centered component of the profession. She served in multiple public civic leadership roles, including on the LA Cultural Affairs Commission, the Mayor's Design Advisory Panel, and the National AIA Interior Architecture Advisory Group. In 2016, she was elevated to AIA College of Fellows, and she's been recognized with the International Interior Design Association's Leadership Award of Excellence, as well as the Educator of the Year Award from the LA Chapter AIA. A little about her professional work now. She's founding principal, together with Rick Gooding, of award-winning LA firm Chu plus Gooding, whose work focuses on arts and higher education. Their client list is a powerful who's who of the US cultural sphere: MoCA, Hammer Museum, the Getty Center, Autry Museum of the American West, Studio Museum in Harlem, the Huntington, the Los Angeles Philharmonic Association, and Southern California Public Radio, to name a few. Chu Gooding is also part of the design team that was awarded the LA Convention Center renovation, not a small project. Having worked with Todd Williams and Billy Tsian Architects and Franklin Israel before starting her own firm, Annie comes from a tradition of Gesamtkunstwerk, or total work of art, applying her sophisticated and sensitive color and material sensibilities to every detail of a building, as well as to landscapes, interior spaces, student activities, dinner parties, philanthropic endeavors, and civic enterprises, all focused on making the spaces we live in more beautiful, warm, and joyful. I'm excited to have her share her latest work with our community here at Elac. Please join me in welcoming Annie Chu.
Thank you. Thank you. That was way too much. I'm actually going to focus on only 3 projects today, because I'll just start, maybe. I'll just do my share screen at this point. Let me just get that going. Stop 2. Okay. Can you guys see?
Yes, beautiful green.
Okay. You're seeing the full slide and not my presenter slide, right?
No notes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sometimes my brain doesn't work very well. So thank you again. I don't know if I'm going to have some super workout for you, but I'm going to work on 3 projects for you. And with each of the projects, I'm going to share a little bit of like almost like an observation or a bag of tricks. Like Angelo had said, I came from Hong Kong. I have a sister who also ended up being in design. And in the very beginning, let me just go ahead and change the slide. I want to share what I thought was the beginning of my design roots. And it's a childhood game that my sister and I played. We start out doing a scribble for each other. And then each of us have to then complete some kind of drawing based on that scribble. Strangely, in looking back at this situation, I think that that's sort of where our form language, our kind of understanding of composition and working with something, you know, that is on hand right now and trying to make something out of it. How's my audio coming across? Is it okay?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So instead of showing you a whole bunch of new projects, I think that I would like to direct you to our website, which has probably all the videos and each of the projects we try to talk about it, actually the process of it. So if you're interested in any of those projects, please go ahead and check out the website. As I got into the architecture profession, I realized that, and also teaching, I realized that we have a struggle within our profession and within our discipline, which is that architecture is strangely both a discipline and a profession. And, you know, I think that school is a really kind of precious time to learn about design, to learn about critical thinking, to really absorb everything we can that will help elevate the discipline. Not to say that we can't also at the same time learn professional skills that make us marketable as part of the community when we come out to work, but this tussle between the discipline and the profession is both interesting and frustrating, because if you have gone to school, then you're putting yourself at a different bar when you actually start working on your projects, because you remember some of your teachers prompting, you know, what does this all mean? And I think that it's actually a very worthwhile pursuit for the rest of your life. And I think many of us and those of your teachers has also have pursued this kind of path in their lifetime to just struggle between the discipline and the profession and moving in and out of different parts of it. Very kind of active, fascinating. So the first project I want to show you has a lot to do with materials. A while ago, we were asked to come up with a design based on a carpet company, a ceiling panel company, a furniture company, and a glass company. And to put everything together into space and to use it as a kind of showcase of their material. So we said, what are we going to do with carpet? So I just want to give you a preview. This is what we ended up putting together as a kind of temporary exhibition. So the thing that will start working with the materials on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see this kind of ramp. The material on the ramp itself is actually a deconstructed carpet. So one of the main things that we wanted to do whenever we work with materials to try to figure out how were they made? What is the process of making, and can we insert ourselves into the process? Carpet is made with a backing material, pulling yarn through that material, and then using latex or some other binder to stabilize the back of it. So when you turn the carpet over, sometimes you see this kind of rubbery thing. That's to keep all the yarn on the backing stable. So we said, wait, before you put on the latex stabilizer, can we mess with the yarn? So we start taking the yarn and we start unraveling it. We start pulling it. So as you go forward and pull it, you realize that you can also create a pattern with basically not putting all the yarn onto the carpet, so that that's the normal way. That prompted us to start thinking about other ways that carpet have been used. So this diagram shows you the ramp as well as this back wall that you see in the diagram. The back wall is actually a carpet that's been wrinkled, you know, like a Shar-Pei dog or something like that. Because back in the 70s, whenever people used to use carpet on the wall rather than on the floor to actually create an acoustical environment. And we thought, well, you know, what if we actually allow it to have a different expression? And that's sort of what we came up with. So 2 ways of kind of working with the carpet, whole and deconstructed. At the same time, I was actually teaching at Art Center College of Design. I was working with a thesis student at the time, and we were looking at medical silicone as a way of sort of thinking about a different way of making a coffee cup holder and twisting it to a certain extent after we cut it to see if we can indicate, you know, if Starbucks give you something like that, twist it, that means it's super hot, or if it's untwisted and it's flat, it's not so hot. So we were starting to cut, and we realized that if you make parabola cuts, such as what you're seeing here, it'll flop over. And if your parabola is really high, you're gonna have a very big flop over. So this screen that we created to create some kind of privacy can be modulated. So you can make it more transparent, as you can see when the parabola is very tall, or more opaque when the parabola is really short. At the same time, another manufacturer that we were trying to snoop around was a ceiling company, and they do these ceiling panels. They're kind of pressed aluminum or metal. They're stiff panels that in the lay-in ceiling, but they have been using a kind of very thin wood foil over the aluminum so that it appears that you're putting wood ceiling on your lay-in ceiling. And we start seeing that they also create a perforated one, totally perforated, because then they can use the acoustical material behind it, and then it has acoustical value as well. And then we said, how do you make the holes? And then we went and visited their factory, and the factory actually is completely computerized and automated, and every hole is its own punch. And they just kind of throw all the punch down, punch through the aluminum, and there are the perforated. And we said, well, if we give you a different pattern, could you individually control each of those punches? And they said, oh yeah. I said, why did you not do it? Was there difficulty? He said, no, no one ever mentioned that. So we created a pattern that is a kind of a non-repeat pattern, so that we can tell some of the punches, don't go down and punch the metal, or go ahead and do it. So that created a new product for them, in fact. So what did I learn from this project? When we were doing this project for the exhibition, I was thinking about, you know, how many different kinds of spaces did we create out of that little room that have all these different materials in it. And it got to a point where I start going, well, you know, we're in traffic all the time in LA. And I just took a picture out of my car window while in full stop, of course, not moving. And this is a typical picture when you're like on, let's say, Mulholland or something like that, and you're kind of looking at it. And I said, how do we communicate the different parts of space? So in looking at it, I said, can we think about all of these factors that are in this picture? As you can see, we have a neutral foreground. The curb and the roadway kind of stand in for some kind of a floor and wall division. There are thresholds, there are borders, there's layers and textures. The middle ground is visually dense, and then the background is very much in high contrast. So I said, okay, can we translate that in some way into, let's say, an interior room? So this is kind of a first attempt at it, and say, hey, you know, we got the foreground, neutral foreground, we got walls and floor division, we got a highly contrasting background, we have a middle ground that is full of kind of visual density. You know, that's a little bit of a recipe, isn't it, to translate? So in translating that, I was thinking about maybe each one of you as the students think about the project that you just saw, the exhibition project, and assign some of these terms to it, because I think one of the difficulty and one of the way that we communicate with each other in talking about design is to share some kind of common language, a kind of vocabulary that we share in common, so we can talk about different things. And that is the beginning of the kind of foundational level of a discipline where we can actually communicate with each other with some kind of shared terminology. So I encourage you for the students to really begin to hone some of that vocabulary. So when you're talking with your instructors and others, go ahead and start using those terms. The second project, well, actually, let's do a superset of workout. You know, like when you work out once and then you work out again, that's called a superset. So the second set I want to do with you is a material and color liaison. Some of you guys who have seen my other lectures for schools probably have gone through this exercise. So what I want to do right now is have you focus on this color screen. As you can see, this color screen is going from a gradation of a color on the left to a color on the right. So individually, if I focus you on the left-hand side and then I ask you to personify that color, what is the age of the person who this color represents, you will see that the age between the color on the left and the age that you assign to the color on the right is very different. And if I ask you about gender, you might assign different genders between the two extreme colors. And if I say this person has a line of work, a career, you might even say, well, this person on the left is doing something else, and the person on the right is, you know, researcher at a university about philosophy. I don't know. And you can kind of keep going with that. And what I wanted to say is that we really need to understand, as people who work with all of these materials, right? Materials meaning physical materials, resources of understanding of concepts, material, color, and just color itself. Those are all within our toolbox as designers, as architects. And we somehow need to really understand how to work with it, because that's how our brain is starting to process it. As I'm talking and as you're thinking about this, you kind of begin to hopefully also get what I'm saying, that everything that in the world that we encounter is going to be having some sort of liaison or association. And we need to figure out how to kind of use that particular association to our advantage to kind of make our design more effective. One thing about color, I'm very kind of partial to the power of color, is because when we were little babies, when we're born, we open our eyes, we don't have names for words and, you know, names for what is it, like a door or anything in our environment, but we have color. And that's our first very, very primitive, very foundational response to the environment, is how those colors come to play. Throughout history, if you continue to pursue architectural history, you will understand that even Le Corbusier, and there's a lot of architects who have struggled with this kind of strange power of color, not under the control. And it's a really fascinating subject as well. Material wise, I do this thing, like if you take any type of material in your world around your daily life, and you don't look at it just the way it is, but you look at it with that kind of association and liaison we were practicing with the color earlier. I bet you, with a little bit of practice, you can start assigning just about everything on this list plus to what you have just seen with this apple. So it's a kind of fascinating idea, because what it acknowledges is that our brain is not compartmentalized a lot of times, that where we try to file things like taste and texture or music sound, or what is the space for, or even the height of the space, or is it going down or is it going up, does it have a window, or even air temperature. All those things are not sort of in their own boxes in our brain, or in any of the user's brain that will eventually experience your design. They are leaky, very leaky. They're kind of connective in some way. And our brain fires up all these connections between one thing and another that doesn't seem to have a relationship, but eventually will. So I just want to bring that to your attention as you keep going with your career in architecture and design. Second project I want to show you, first of all, I want to acknowledge that any project that I'm showing you is not the project done by one person. So this second project I'm doing is showing you has like at least this many people working on it. And so let's start. So I'm going up in scale. So I just showed you a really small project. So now I'm showing you a slightly bigger project, and then we'll end up with a larger project. The second project started out in the canyon. What you're seeing is an entry court view of a house. This is in Rustic Canyon, which is a part of, well, the Santa Monica Mountains and beyond Pacific Palisades. And this is what the context used to be. There's a creek that's basically part of the water control, flood control situation that has grown over so much that it sort of became a quite desirable feature within the canyon itself. And it has a very storied history. There has been a bunch of sort of bohemian people, authors, artists, painters, musicians who have occupied this part of the canyon quite a bit. And it has still this kind of very rustic, somewhat bohemian, like, are we really in LA type of quality to it? This is how it started. So our clients came to us, and it's a couple with 3 children and grandma. So there's 3 generations, and they said, we've been trying, to kind of renovate this house. There are these beautiful sycamore trees. Can you help us come with a design of a house that could fulfill like 3 generations living together, each having their own privacy, but also having a sense of community and an idea that this house will enjoy and actually take advantage of all these trees, and can you please not knock them down in the process. So we started out with some idea about having these trees that must stay. So as you can see that, this guy right here, this tree right here, was one of the trees that you saw when we started this section, the tree at the entry. And of course, there's a stand of trees that are in the rear by the creek. That's where the creek was. And then there's all the rest of the sycamore that just kind of shows up wherever they are. And so basically this whole project becomes one of how to kind of manipulate dealing with the trees. And so we started out acknowledging that. And then created these pavilions, doing some kind of understanding of how circulation goes. And then where the service part of it. And so it's a very kind of simple diagram of how we situate things while we acknowledge the trees always ever present. Where do we put vertical circulation amongst the circulation? How does circulation expand as we go up? And where are these private spaces that the client has said each individual must have their own private space? As well as where each individual may pursue a kind of private outdoor. So as we keep going, we, of course, started with models and drawings and sketches. So I wanted to share with you. Let me see if this will work. We'll see if it works. Okay, the video doesn't work right now, so we'll come back to it. So the house has, as you can see, developed into basically a courtyard plan, a dual courtyard plan. As you arrive from the right-hand side, you're coming in here, and you can come into the house this way, or you can come into the house this way. And then from within the house itself, the constructed landscape is about this kind of pool view, and then the creek and the stand of trees beyond. On the second floor is stacked these private pavilions. And the house has quite a bit of kind of sectional move about it because of the requirement of the site. It is really sort of moving down into the site, is moving up into these privatized spaces. So the section is manipulated in such a way that we can stack a lot of the complexity of individual and communal spaces within it. This is how it's approached. Here you go walking through the entry. And the constructed view of the pool court. It was really important for us to acknowledge all the kind of indoor-outdoor living conditions that our predecessors built in Southern California, starting from even the Schindler House, about how people live indoors and outdoors in Southern California, and basically try to get each of these rooms within this house its own outdoors. So all outdoor spaces are appropriated for living. And one thing that was really interesting to us was, again, the acknowledgement of the courtyard house, where you see through your space into a space and you see your own building again. And that kind of special condition of being able to see through layers of space, I think adds something to the everyday enjoyment of domestic spaces. So you're not just always in a cell anymore. You're always changing view as you move around the house. So how did we end up dealing with, or how did we provide for the sort of 3 generations? So when you come in here as a guest and you're wanting to have this kind of private, sort of more grown-up situation, this is sort of where you are, right? And in going through this area right here, it's a little bit tight area, and you'll see that it's full of sort of outdoor, like the stucco material on the outdoor went indoor. And then you come into this really kind of grand central dining room here that's open to the kitchen and open to a very special place where a young mother is watching the 3 children coming back from school doing their homework so she can monitor all the computers and all that stuff. It's really a house that's built with a program of care because the mother who was our main client really talked about, you know, how care is being delivered within this house. This is a special sort of office space, but it's actually flexible should the, you know, should a student or one of the kids need like some special help or tutoring or something, they can take advantage of that space. The pool goes into basically the pool family room. This is where things can get wet and it doesn't matter. All the services, as you can see here, this particular bathroom is, again, a kind of little significant kind of program of care, because in the morning when you rush your children out and they forgot to brush their teeth, this is your last chance you can get them to brush their teeth before you send them away. And then there's a kind of court here. This court can be used either in the service way or it can be used by this room. This room is also flexible. It can be a room for guests or it can be taken away for some kind of private office. The guest room and the suite can be used all together where grandma can be. So she can be here without dealing with, you know, all the family, but at the same time, she can also go ahead and kind of communicate with the family in this family room, and she has her own garden in the back. So it's trying to pack a lot of program into this plan. So as you can see, what we just saw was, now you can understand the color coding. Notice that there's a stair in the middle. The stair works like this. So you're seeing the pool and the spa beyond, the kitchen homework area on the left, and the stair keeps going up. But here is a view from the homework area next to the kitchen, next to the dining room, through that passage on the right-hand side that leads you to the living room. And the kitchen also has a window looking back at the entry courtyard so that you can kind of monitor who's coming in. Again, this is the dining room view out, and you can see the outdoor area. This is the grown-up quiet space. As you go up, each of these people have to have their private pavilion. So the first one is the high school age daughter on the, and then the bottom one is a shared bedroom, 2 bedrooms with a shared bath between the 2 boys. So you can see from one room to the other, or you can close it off. And then they have their own outdoor deck, which then looks over to the parents' deck beyond. And there's another outdoor space sort of carved into the overhang of the outdoor area. Back to this upper circulation, it's a little bit stacked. It's got all these different sections going on. And as you come up here, if you take 4 or 5 more stairs, you actually get up to another space, and you split up to the left, to the right, to the children's room. And then you have the space here, which is that top of the stair split space. So here is a better view. On the left-hand side of the slide, it's going into the parents' room. In between where the white cube is actually an office. for the father. This is a space where the kids are doing all their video games and their sleepover and all this stuff. And then beyond us on the background is going into the kids' rooms. The master, or they call the primary bedroom suite, is quite specific. They did not want to spend a lot of energy putting like a really big bedroom, but they did want a lot of the kind of ritual of bathing and stuff to be taken care of. So the bedroom is quite small, and the bathroom is actually quite large. So what's interesting is that the house have grown as the children are older. So as the kids, like let's say, for example, in the summer, if the two boys are away, you know, that's what you're dealing with in terms of the occupancy of the second floor. When the older sister went to college, this is how the house was operating. When they're all back for the holidays, it's back to all of that kind of craziness in the upstairs. And so it's a house that's kind of packed everything. So it got us to thinking about, you know, how do we design something like this and anticipate all the different scale changes? How do we stack all this program together? It got me to thinking about a drawing that I did in one of the kind of a desk crit with some of my students before, talking about how you actually design with a more ADHD kind of idea, which is you consider all scales, everything all at once. So this is what the drawing was, and I will explain what this is. So one of my students had come up with a picture of this rendering that they saw. And I said, well, what do you understand? Why are you drawn to this rendering? And so I said, okay, let's think about how you go from a rendering to something next, which is, okay, you got the rendering first, right? You don't have anything else yet. What's the next thing you want to imagine? What can you tell from the clues of this rendering? So everyone starts in a different way. Sometimes you start here. Sometimes you start here, right? Most of the time we start right about here, which is to kind of think about what is that plan or something that that drawing was telling us. So if we look at that, what we see, I think I tried to put a diagram, like a little explanation here, is that this is a partial plan down below here. And, you know, the line that you see here in the center, right there where the green line is, the division between the interior and exterior. So based on that rendering, you can see that there was a whole bunch of bookshelves or something on the interior, which are these right here. Right, you see a lot of activity inside. Then we imagine activity. Are there people sitting there studying, reading? Are there people sitting looking out? Are there people walking? Are there people checking out the stacks? What is going on in the ceiling, which are these kind of imagined other lines that we're looking at right here? Right. Those dotted lines that indicate something else is going on in the ceiling. And then at the same time, looking at possibly what is the material of the floor. And then you look outside and said, okay, well, outdoors, in the outdoor area, maybe this is all like, you know, some kind of paving first, but before the paving, maybe there's some other things that are going on here. And then eventually we get out into more of the landscape area. Maybe there's a tree right there. It looks like there's some couple trees. So we're trying to get as much of this information down as possible. And then at the same time, you can start going into different scales. So you can say, oh, it looks like the section is going to be like this, right? It's all imagined. There's not enough, other evidence to kind of tell us what it is. But at the same time, we can also look at zoom in, because sometimes when you zoom in, you're much clearer. So if I take a section right here, looking that way, I ended up with that section up on top right here. Right, so with this now, the window is here, the outdoor is right here, the indoor is right here with those bookshelves. What's on the bookshelf? Your mind can kind of go crazy. Maybe it's not just books, it's other objects. What's on top of it? How is this thing lit? So you start thinking about all the system. What is that ceiling like? Is there some kind of sun control? How does a person sit? How is mechanical being delivered? Maybe is part of the built-in at the bottom of it. How does a person consume this furniture and space and stuff? So all of this is built in without any knowledge whatsoever of the rest of the building. But I think that is actually helpful, like even this is also thinking about how lighting works on the outside and how the building hits the ground and what is transitioning to the hardscape and the landscape. So all of this is happening sort of within that kind of 20-25 minutes that I'm working with the student, so just talking through and riffing off of each other's ideas and putting things down. So ultimately, as you can see, that this piece right here probably came, as I can see, it actually came after that section on the top. It's a kind of enlarged idea about how things are built. And in that, you start talking about actually how things are fabricated. You can understand that there's a soft cushion, there's a soft cushion back. You can understand that how the feet are actually being accommodated and all this stuff. So anyways, just to say that basically, it sometimes helps to kind of think about everything all at once. The last project I want to talk to you about is this, is actually this largest project. Ingelo had mentioned that we were part of a team. We were the only team member that is actually located in Los Angeles. Our official role on this project is interior architect, but because we are the only people in LA, the whole team turned to us and said, can you sort of talk about what would be your desire in working on this project? We said, well, all convention centers, as far as we can tell, have, not really addressed the locale, like, what is authentic about the city that is in. A lot of times people come from far away and they may not have ever come to LA before. So they came to LA and this might be the landing spot. Once they get on the 10 freeway and turn on the Pasadena freeway, they are now here. And it's the first time that they've seen LA. So can we do something that is more authentic? So we started out thinking about 4 things. I said, let's boil it down to 3 or 4 things that are so important to make this project real. Okay. So one of the things is the atmosphere. One is weather, design, and making. I'll go into a little bit more detail with each. On LA atmosphere, basically, there was this movie called LA Plays Itself, and it's by this filmmaker called Tom Anderson. And he basically took all the clips of LA featured in all kinds of movies and put it all together into a movie. So you see LA in all these different depictions. And he calls it sunshine and noir. Noir meaning dark and, mysterious and stuff like that. And a lot of us, the way that Hollywood has been projecting LA has always been this kind of sunshine, where indoor, outdoor, and all this stuff. But at the same time, there's this kind of dark, steamy type of side to the LA that is kind of very mysterious. So we wanted to do both. we want to acknowledge that the LA weather is always so great. I mean, today is a kind of exception, but it's still kind of nice with the rain. And we have all this precedence of people sort of dealing with this wonderful weather. They try to come here. And we have a rich, rich archival history of design that, you know, started early, even through the mid-century. We are a lot of the kind of cultural capital of United States. That kind of production is here. At the same time, we also have a lot of makers in Los Angeles, the proliferating kind of innovation, production. You know, we want to propose that this convention center will become a scaffold almost, permanent channel that constantly show off basically our regional productions. We have the aerospace industry, we have the design industry, our digital fabrication industry, all that stuff is going on here. So in terms of LA weather, flora and fauna, this is just a snippet, like this is just taking pictures of the plants in my backyard and coming up with a color palette that represents a lot of what we see every day in LA. These are some of the LA colors, not all of it, but some of it. And so we said, okay, these are the design drivers. We have a color and material palette that is the Southern California weather DNA, you know, the blurring between the inside and outside. But we also have this rich graphic design history that gives us all these patterns. So can we do something with that? Can we ever take this kind of ever accumulating aesthetic driver of these patterns and just throw it everywhere, right? So how do we control it? This is where systems come in. So how do you operate a pattern so we start assigning different aspects of this project, because the project is so large, you have to start calling things by name, you know, sections at a time, almost like geography. So these are some ways that we were talking about, you know, can we force landscape, for example, and we call everything landscape. So that begins to make us think about the pattern sort of operating in a landscape fashion, merging those two ideas. Some of the early sketches that I made was like just kind of riffing off a landscape pattern, you know, what does the public space look like? How do we bring these kind of ever moving surfaces of patterns and stuff into the mix of ideas? So these are early kind of conceptual sketches. Where does this arrival of the Pico Boulevard comes in? It's called Pico Passage, kind of troublesome little aspect of the project. I won't go into detail. How do we take the existing convention center, because it's both remodel and addition, how does the remodel play into the existing? How does the furniture, the landscape, the pattern come into play again? This kind of idea of being able to find outdoor, indoor. Here's some of the ideas again. Here's some specific sort of furniture idea. We can't take this wall in front of the convention center away so we can look downtown, but how can we recondition that view with this idea of those design drivers? So working with Oland, our landscape architect, they were out in Philadelphia at the time, sort of riffing off of each other's idea about the pattern. They also went into the mode of looking at the total landscape of the whole district and sort of beginning to call them different names, just so that we can come to terms with how to work on it. Because when you work on the larger projects, you gotta have to bring them up to some kind of scale so you can deal with it. So we started assigning sort of like really landmarks and repeated systems that are going on within the convention center this way. Some of the language we share within our team. And then again, sort of taking to a kind of very sort of conceptual level, how do we bring these things in, doing photo collages or kind of bringing in some of the local references that we have from Los Angeles and trying to think through some of these design drivers that I showed you earlier. when you deal with like a very large space like a ballroom, it's quite a challenge because there's no way you can get away from doing something modular because it has to be so flexible. By the end of our design, which is still in kind of a early DD phase, there's 30 ways at least to kind of occupy this ballroom and to split it up or join it and stuff. So on this everywhere, every scale, all at once kind of ADHD mentality, we start looking at things like this. As you can see that there's sections, there are reflective ceiling plan, there are little perspective, there's zoomed in, like sometimes about how do you construct these walls, what is it made of? You start making some kind of jump and assumption of how to make these spaces. This is a pre-function space, one of the pages that we make for each of the spaces that talk about the big ideas behind it, what is driving that. I won't go into it too much. Again, sort of bringing in ideas about, where does the atmosphere weather that we talked about earlier come into play with these kind of pre-function space. Again, that grand ballroom, this is where I think the noir comes in. We need to make that a little bit glamorous. So we design our own sort of ceiling, our own lighting fixtures, and we want to reference the garment district that is so nearby. So all the walls become very fluid and kind of almost fabric form, as you can see, the patterning and stuff like that. So that's where sort of the ideas got pulled from, is really trying to absorb everything that's going on within the district, within the locale near the convention center. We also thought that there were two kinds of nodes that repeat, that the system repeats itself throughout the space. Sometimes they're atmosphere nodes and sometimes they're making nodes. I won't go too much into it. So how to bring kind of landscape in some way. So again, checking ourselves with those 4 ideas, making pattern, atmosphere, and weather, whether we have continually think about that. So, and, even outside of the convention center itself, there's a passageway through where cars had to drive through. It's called Pico Passage. Very troublesome, really difficult space to do. We said, where are other passages in LA? Where can we learn from? Where is the color palette? Again, when you can't think about the space, you start thinking about something smaller and you come back to something medium and larger, so you can bounce back and forth and think about ideas that are already here. Can we extract some of the DNA of, let's say, the 110 freeway tunnel? What is great about that? And thinking about this kind of passageway that cars have to drive through. So this would be like the arrival into the convention center, where different things are going on all at once. And that's where the open space Gilbert Lindsay Plaza off of Figueroa is going to be like. And that's it. So I'm going to stop share. Yeah, open for any kind of questions. I mean, basically, I think you have to use your brain. If it's a crazy ADHD brain, you just use it. So there's no one way of designing. If you're a kitchen sink person who has 1,000 ideas, just use it. Part of the thing is to kind of control it. Architecture is layers of systems, and that's the only thing that I think helps, pull things together, is seeing if there's a common thread that can drive through everything.
Annie, this is Ingelo. Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful slides. I love how you art direct your work. I was wondering if we could go back to the first slide you showed, where you talked about architecture as a discipline and a profession. and ask you to unpack that a little bit for our students and explain what you meant by that.
Okay. It's such a simple diagram. I don't need to show you again, right? Because there's a rectangle color of discipline, one of profession. What I was constantly struggling with is that, we have schools that have to deliver a professional program because NCARB have to kind of say, you must deliver all this stuff in order for people to be prepared to go into our professional industry, be useful, get your license and all this stuff. That's part of what a school has to deliver. But at the same time, the school has a higher, even a higher demand for the school to make you lifelong learners, lifelong thinkers, people who can think critically, who don't just say, oh, I like it, I don't like it, or look at everything and say, that looks fine, because that does not advance architecture. Architecture is really Ingela said it earlier, it's to me first about service, but it's also an art. And we have to do it well. When you do it well enough, it's like a marvelous, beautiful thing, because you are giving people an experience that they never get to experience in the daily life. You're giving them wonderful spaces. Those wonderful spaces make people happy. They elevate their spirit, make them want to be productive, or make them want to relax, or whatever you plan it to be. So how do you get to that point? You can't go there just by studying the profession. That's like a lot of nuts and bolts. That's a lot of very technical things, understanding code, understanding how structure, mechanical, everything integrates. All that is great and must be part of our tool chest. But we also have to aspire for like greater things, whatever the greater things would be. Sustainable, like, this thing is built so that it takes the least amount of carbon footprint to build and it's still beautiful. Or I only have $100, so I need to figure it out how to do it $100 and deliver beauty and function at the same time. That's part of what the discipline will push you to do, is to kind of go outside of just the restrictions of what the technical box of profession give you, and aspire for more. So all your teachers are here to help, get that engine going at the same time. And that's why school is such a precious time to deal with that kind of discipline and profession merging. And as you get into the profession, my encouragement is still, invest in the discipline. Go to lectures, go see buildings, whenever you can travel, go and analyze it, stop at a traffic light like I did on a traffic jam, look at your environment and start using some of the thinking skills and terminology that your teachers have worked with you. Apply that. The more you apply that kind of architectural thinking to understand your environment, the more it comes easily. So that's what I kind of meant.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon.
Annie,
My name is Marcelo Chicaiza, and I just have a question. And but first of all, I just want to say thank you for your time. And my question is, when viewing at a project that you're about to begin with, how do you place hierarchy between different elements such as color, texture, and material? Because I think you focus on that in between your projects that you showed us.
Yeah. I mean, I think we usually don't even think about that at the end. I mean, I've taught for 30 years before I stopped teaching. And so I know that there's many times when someone asks a student at the end of their thesis saying, so what is it made out of? And then like typically, oh, it's out of concrete and wood or whatever. So that has not been thought about, but it's so important to allow those things, material and color and all the stuff to come on this in the beginning, if it happens to percolate in the beginning, right? So if I go to a site and I was admiring the texture of the trees or the color of that environment, why push it aside till the end? Let it kind of just stay with you. So the idea is, like, you guys are so good with multitasking. What I'm asking for you to do is exactly the same. Multitask, but bring, like, you know, like if you have an 8-burner stove and you have 8 pots going, keep them going, but some of them you don't touch for a long time, and you keep pushing things from the back to the front in a juggling way, right? Because sometimes, like, you know, that's why I wanted to show you that the apple, you know, and the color, you know, that 2-color thing, because sometimes you get stuck and you can't think about, you know, the function or the kind of puzzle making of the program, or you don't know what it's made out of. You can go back to that kind of first instinct with the site that you saw and say, wait, that site feels like, you know, the color of those trees, whatever, in that environment looks like a mix between 2 people. One person is like this 20-year-old young person who likes, you know, indie music, who has this kind of idea that, you know, the best thing to do is go walk on the beach and then, you know, play video games. And then the other part of the site feels like, you know, they're 50-year-old professor who has spent a lot of time researching, but they also have, you know, a side gig, you know, racing motorcycle or whatever, you know. So you start thinking about this as like your site does not become generic anymore. The sites start being very specific, right? Because of your interest through the material line or through the color line, that allows you to break a little bit from just kind of linear approach. I do a concept, I expand the concept, I apply, you know, my mechanical, electrical, lighting, and then I build a model, and then I go back and look at the space on the inside. You can actually bring things in, like let it side swipe you, because sometimes those things that were felt in the beginning can really inform the project. So how do I bring those 2 people that I just talked about as a kind of observation of the site into a project in the middle of design? I would say, oh, wait, this person who is this kind of soft 20-year-old person, and then this kind of hardcore, very complex 50-year-old person who's very serious, but also has this kind of exciting side. Well, they're kind of like these 2 systems in my building right now. There's a really transparent, soft side looking at landscape, and then there's a really hardcore side that feels strong, has strong materials, you know, really kind of have like spaces in between the walls are thick, and there's even rooms inside a wall or something like that that are very, you know, has a skylight pointing out, so it's very exciting. So you can kind of like do something like this. Does that make sense? So the hierarchy is, I'm the person who doesn't really look at hierarchy that much. I mean, there is hierarchical conditions, but I do think that there are other things that can kind of pull in. Yeah.
Thank you for explaining. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Valeria and Kelly had some questions. Are you still here? Do you want to ask them?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Valeria, you put something on chat. Do you want to read it?
Yes, I would like to read it. I just wanted to ask, do you have a personal strategy for organizing how you tackle a project? But I believe my answer was, I believe my question was answered with the last question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is that part where you confront the program. Let's say your teacher gave you a program of 10 pieces of, you know, functional spaces, and you have to put them together. Sometimes what I do is I group them a little bit so that I don't have 10, I only have 4. Right? Or sometimes I say, okay, I don't know what this is, but let me take the biggest piece, because I know that I have to fit the biggest piece first. So what is the biggest piece? And then I let the smaller pieces come, and that's where hierarchy might come in and stuff. So coming to terms of the project is like, the first thing is not to be overwhelmed by the, you know, the data, the, you know, 500 square foot, 2 of these, 6 of these 100 square feet, you know, that you have to kind of group them and give them a lot more kind of specific demands, personality, needs, right? And
Yes.
stuff like that. So if you boil it down, like if I say, Valeria, you know, there's 4 components to this project. You can probably knock that out pretty quickly. But if I said there's 20 components to it, you'd probably say, oh my God, this is going to take me like weeks to figure it out. So, you know, group them. That's one of the things about the kind of puzzle making part of the beginning of the project that could be useful.
Mhm.
But yeah, but the other organizing thing is just to keep some of the most basic instinct of when you first approach the project. Like, remember, like convention center, so big, you know,
Yeah.
gazillions. I have 4 design ideas, 4 concepts, right? And
Mm.
then those 4 concepts keep bringing forth, like, you just bring it back. Is this about weather? Is this about, you know, making? Is this about this? Is this sunshine or, you know, like, you just keep using that as a way of kind of provoking as you
Yes.
design.
Yeah. I understand. Thank you. I really like that approach that you
It
mentioned
works for
earlier.
me. That it, you know, like, that's the only way. It's just the way I found it to be useful, because I'm a kitchen sink person, so I can't deal with it.
I understand. Thank you so much.
And Kelly, oh, design software. Okay, very
Yes,
interesting.
good afternoon. Thank you again for your time.
Sure.
I noticed all of your renderings, they all take a different approach or communicate differently, but is there a specific design software that you would say that it's more reliable or utilizes or communicates your designs to your expectations other than for myself in particular, I'm studying Rhino. So, and I know in the past we studied AutoCAD, and then, you know, there's a Revit, and do you feel like they all communicate collectively at
They're
the
all
end of the
different.
day?
Yeah, they're all different. Our office uses AutoCAD, Revit, Rhino, V-Ray, all kinds of different other rendering programs too. But I think that what is really common when we're talking to each other is actually a hand sketch. So fast, you know, like when we want to communicate, like, so that's why you saw a lot of those sketches, like the sketches I made for convention center. You see early ones are just a messy pencil color things.
Yes.
You do that like so quickly, like each one of those sketches take no more than 15 minutes, even with the color. And the faster you go, the more the stuff in your brain gets like pushed into the hand sketch. And then you have something to immediately talk to people about. Like if I wait till I get my Rhino model good, and then I, you know, map it and I spit out my color, and or even if I make the Revit model. And Revit is actually really tricky because in a way it's better for people who have had a lot more experience building, because you have to build it, you know, and so that part of it is very troublesome and very kind of, you know, you can't change it as quickly. But I think in the conceptual phase, or even in the in between time, we will be looking at, let's say, you know, a lot of times we're now on Zoom. So someone will put something up on Zoom. It's kind of a, you know, a Rhino with the perspective render that's like just starting. And then we'll be on Zoom and I'm annotating, or somebody else is annotating, and we're sketching over that thing, right? So you don't ever let the software dictate how you're going to design. Whenever it's possible to do something faster by hand, we just do that in conjunction with the software. But I would say the industry, you know, Revit, Rhino, all those things are good. Yeah, but I would say Revit is for me more on the kind of professional building level. Like you really need to know how buildings are built to really effectively use it. So Rhino's good for all the form making and stuff, but just be careful that the common problem with people using only Rhino and not taking those cuts that from the Rhino model seriously and really looking at them as plans and sections is that you don't have that thinking tool. Plans and sections are thinking tools. They allow you, if you take it seriously and you put everything in it, like remember I show you that little drawing of every scale possible, everything, on that,
Yes.
based on that rendering, right?
Yes.
You have to take the Rhino model cuts and you got to bring it to those levels in terms of plans and sections. Like, don't let it just be the cut of the model and you keep working on the model. You take those cuts and you study them, right? As you can see when in that slide that I show you, we were studying them, right? Trying to imagine the next level, or trying to let the next level of information that's beyond the development level of the drawings at that point inform backwards. So you can kind of like time travel into the future and come back to the present. You can also go backwards and come back to the present. So there's a lot of time traveling, I think, in design that we don't talk about too much, but really study plans and sections. For me, because I'm very affected, like I come into architecture because of space, because of like having gone into buildings where there's marvelous spaces, and I go, how do people do this? And I'm interested in that. I almost start a project in section more than I do in plan. I wanted to nail down like that kind of one split second where I have a clarity. Like if you have a big, this is like a very common analogy people said. Okay, you know that blind man and the elephant, I think it's probably a Kipling, Rudyard Kipling story. You have a bunch of blind men and they were asked to describe the elephant. You know that one? No? Okay. So one said, oh, the elephant is like a tree trunk, because they're like touching the legs, right? One said, oh, an elephant's like a wall. And then the other one said, ooh, the elephant's like a giant boa constrictor snake. And then another one said, oh, the elephant's like a rope. And basically all together, design is like that. We are blind men with the elephant. We don't even know we're designing an elephant. We're kind of testing. There are times when I'm very clear about the rope and I want to put it down. That's where those little drawings were, where you travel forward and you kind of say, oh, it's like this, this slice is really clear to me. And then eventually when all the slices kind of come together, then you get the elephant. But you don't even know you're designing an elephant. If you know that you're designing an elephant and then you go at it, then it's not a creative process anymore. Then you're going to just like, design, you're just doing design development on a design that you already decided on day one. And that's not the way to design. That's not where good design comes in. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The
Sure.
elephant story put it all in perspective, because that means we're all, as you said earlier in your lecture, we all approach things differently. We all start from
Right.
different areas and see different things. So I appreciate you explaining it that way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Annie, thank you for this wonderful lecture. And
Thank you.
I wanna close it perhaps with my take on it.
Please.
I see you guys more like a theater directors, that you pull all the parts, all the gestalt of parts and pieces. But your acumen to me is really kind of having them speak to each other, every little thing or big thing. And you have this constant communication between the parts. As the directors, you kind of watch how the building develops, in our case, since we are architects. And it's really wonderful and refreshing to see that is used as a direct methodology for an architect's office. And I'm kind of understanding how we both like the same instructor, John Knight, and
Yeah.
it's a wonderful
You have to tell
thing.
that story. You have to tell that story. Yeah, you have to give one John Knight story, and I'll tell you one John Knight quick story.
I have so many of them, and
I'll do
let's
mine.
hear yours.
Mine is John Knight is a conceptual artist. When Orhan and I were both in SciArc. I had him in 3rd year undergrad. And, you know, it's like any project you want to do. And he would take, like, I'm designing a house for 2 generations, you know, in the little Santa Monica lot. And he said, you need to read Walter Benjamin, you know, The Task of the Translator, which is like a really heavy duty thing for a 3rd year undergrad to do. And basically what you're doing is a translator. That's what he was trying to tell me. And that book, that particular essay, from that point on, I refer to over and over and over and over again. And then the other thing was, like, if you start talking to John Knight, then this will never happen in this day and age. The studio does not end. So we would end up going to, like, the whole studio moves out of the school to, I hate to say it, but like a bar or, you know, sushi bar or something like that. And we continue and continue and continue. He start giving us all these kind of art history theory references, and they are so important for my own development. So I really appreciate it. But sometimes, yeah, that's my John Knight story. But anyways, I think we're past time. So you have told me you can tell your stories.
When I
another
see
time.
you, it's because some of them I should rather not say here.
Oh yeah, you can.
But one thing I say, I was taking one class from John Knight, and it was a studio, of course. And then at the end of the semester, I found out that I got credit for Japanese architecture. I got credit for urban economics. I got credit for the one-way street, reading Walter Benjamin, like you mentioned. And the biggest credit I got was the studio project. So it's just to give an idea to our students that a classroom was, everything was put on the table, a little bit like what you are doing with your projects, putting things on the sketch paper or on the table or in your minds, and then have them speak to each other and connect them. It's a wonderful way of, as far as I understood from your practice, and it's a really beautifully creative process.
I think it's a really enjoyable process, and this will be my final comment, is that how do you do something where you can be interested in it for the rest of your life, right? So you have to find a way, and I think, you know, when Ingelo said, yeah, I'm always pushing for service, because that's what part of what architecture, the ethics of architecture is. But the other part of architecture that is so great is that it's a connector of everything in your world. It's a way of thinking about the world. It's a way it can help you connect, you know, a myriad of different things that's going on in the world as you're working on the project, you know. And so I don't know any other discipline that can do that. Yeah, so.
Thank you so much. It's such a beautiful way of ending it. And I want to thank Ingalill for having a wonderful introduction. And I also want to thank to our students manager for putting this together, Gilbert Moore. And at that note, thank you so much.
Yeah, and good luck with the finals and everything. And thank you for my dear friends, Peter and Jean from Milan. I can't believe you guys are here, so.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Thank you, Ingalill.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, Orhan, everyone.
Bye.
Good luck. Hey, Peter.
Bye.